Second meditation of the nature of the human mind, that it is more easily known than the body. Yesterday's meditation has plunged me into so many doubts that I still cannot put them out of my mind, nor, on the other hand, can I see any way to resolve them. But, as if I had suddenly slipped into a deep whirlpool, I am in such difficulties that I can neither touch bottom with my foot nor swim back to the surface. Yet I will struggle on, and I will try the same path again, and the one I set out on yesterday, that is to say, eliminating everything in which there is the smallest element of doubt, exactly as if I had found it to be false through and through, and I shall pursue my way until I discover something certain. Archimedes claimed that if only he had a point that was firm and immovable, he would move the whole earth. And great things are likewise to be hoped, if I can find just one little thing that is certain and unshakable. I therefore suppose that all I see is false. I believe that none of those things represented by my deceitful memory has ever existed. In fact, I have no senses at all. Body, shape, extension in space, motion, and place itself are all illusions. What truth then is left? Perhaps this alone, that nothing is certain. But how do I know that there is not something different from all those things I have just listed, about which there is not the slightest room for doubt? Is there not, after all, some God, whatever he should be called, that puts these thoughts into my mind? But why should I think that, when perhaps I myself could be the source of these thoughts? But am I at least not something after all? But have I already denied that I have any senses or any body? Now I'm at a loss, because what follows from this? Am I so bound up with my body and senses that I cannot exist without them? But I convinced myself that there was nothing at all in the world, no sky, no earth, no minds, no bodies. Did I therefore not convince myself that I did not exist either? No, certainly I did exist. If I convinced myself of something, but there is some deceiver or other, supremely powerful and cunning, who is deliberately deceiving me all the time. Beyond doubt, then, I also exist. If he is deceiving me, and he can deceive me all he likes, but he will never bring in about that I should be nothing as long as I think that I am something. So that, having weighted all these considerations sufficiently, and more than sufficiently, I can finally decide this proposition. I exist. Whenever it is uttered by me or conceived in the mind, is necessarily true. But indeed, I do not yet sufficiently understand what in fact this I is that now necessarily exists, so that from now on I must take care, in case I should happen imprudently to take something else to be me, that I claim to be the most certain and evident of all. Hence, I shall now meditate afresh on what I once believed myself to be, before I fell into this train of thought. From this I shall then subtract whatever it has been possible to cast doubt on, even in the slightest degree, by the reasons put forward above, so that in the end there shall remain exactly and only that which is certain and unshakable. So what in fact did I think I was before all this? A human being? Of course. But what is a human being? Shall I say a rational animal? No, for then I should have to examine what exactly an animal is and what rational is, and hence, starting with one question, I should stumble into more and more difficult ones. Nor do I now have so much leisure that I can afford to fritter it away on subtleties of this kind, but here I shall rather direct my attention to the thoughts that spontaneously and by nature's prompting come to my mind beforehand whenever I considered what I was. The first was that I have a face, hands, arms, and this whole mechanism of limbs, such as we see even in corpses. This I refer to as the body. Next, that I took nourishment, moved, perceived with my senses, and thought. These actions indeed are attributed to the soul. What this soul was, however, either I never considered or I imagined it as something very rarefied and subtle, like a wind or fire or a thin air, infused into my coarser parts. But about the body itself, on the other hand, I had no doubts, but I thought I distinctly knew its nature, which, if I had attempted to describe how I conceived it in my mind, I would have explained as follows. By body, I mean everything that is capable of being bounded by some shape of existing in a definite place, of filling a space in such a way as to exclude the presence of another body within it, of being perceived by touch, sight, hearing, taste, or smell, and also by being moved in various ways, not indeed by itself, but by some other thing by which it is touched. For to have the power of moving itself, and also of perceiving by the senses of thinking, I judged could in no way belong to the nature of body. Rather, I was puzzled by the fact that such capabilities were found in certain bodies. It's rich. But what about now, when I am supposing that some deceiver who is supremely powerful and, if I may venture to say so, evil, has been exerting all his efforts to delude me in every way? Can I confirm that I possess the slightest thing of all those that have just said belong to the nature of body? I consider, I think, I go over it all in my mind. Nothing comes up. It would be a waste of effort to go through the list again. But what about the attributes I used to ascribe to the soul? What about taking nourishment or moving? But since I now have no body, these also are nothing but illusions. What about sense perception? Sometimes this does not take place without a body, and I have seemed to perceive very many things when asleep. I later realized I had not perceived. What about thinking? Here I do find something. Is it thought? It is thought. This alone cannot be stripped from me. I am, I exist. This is certain. But for how long? Certainly only for as long as I am thinking. For perhaps if I were to cease from all thinking, it might also come to pass that I might immediately cease altogether to exist. I'm now admitting nothing except what is necessarily true. I am, therefore, speaking precisely, only a thinking thing, that is, a mind or a soul or an intellect or a reason, words the meaning of which was previously unknown to me. I am therefore a true thing and one that truly exists. But what kind of thing? I've said it already, one that thinks. What comes next? I will imagine I'm not that framework of limbs that is called a human body. I'm not some thin air infused into these limbs, or a wind, or a fire, or vapor, or breath, whatever I can picture myself as, for I have supposed that these things do not exist. But even if I keep this supposition, nonetheless, I am still something. But all the time, it is perhaps still the case that These very things I'm supposing to be nothing are nevertheless not distinct from this me that I know. Perhaps I don't know. But this is not the point at issue at present. I can pass judgment only on those things that are known to me. I know that I exist. I'm trying to find out what this I is, whom I know. It is absolutely certain that this knowledge, in the precise sense in question here, does not depend on things of which I do not know yet. Whether they exist, and therefore it depends on none of those things I picture in my imagination. This very word imagination shows where I'm going wrong, for I should certainly be imagining things. If I imagine myself to be anything, since imagining is nothing other than contemplating the shape or image of a bodily thing. Now, however, I know for certain that I exist, and that at the same time, it could be the case that all these things, all these images, and in general everything that pertains to the nature of body, are nonetheless but illusions. Now, this is clear to me. It would seem as foolish of me to say, I shall use my imagination in order to recognize more clearly what I am, as it would be to say, now I am awake and I see something true, but because I cannot see it clearly enough, I shall do my very best to get back to sleep again so that my dreams can show it to me more truly and more clearly. And so I realize that nothing that I can grasp by means of the imagination has to do with this knowledge I have of myself, that I need to withdraw my mind from such things as thoroughly as possible if it is to perceive its own nature as distinctly as possible. That's profound. I need to withdraw my mind as thoroughly as possible if it is to perceive its own nature as distinctly as possible. Hmm. But what therefore am I? A thinking thing. What is that? I mean, a thing that doubts, that understands, that affirms, that denies, that wishes to do this and does not wish to do that, and also that imagines and perceives by the senses. Well, indeed, there's quite a lot there. If all these things really do belong to me, but why should they not belong to me? Is it not me who currently doubts virtually everything, who nonetheless understands something, who affirms this alone to be true and denies the rest, who wishes to know more and wishes not to be deceived, who imagines many things even against his will, and is aware of many things that appear to come via the senses? Is there any of these things that is not equally true as the fact that I exist, even if I'm always asleep, and even if my Creator is deceiving me to the best of his ability? Is there any of them that can be distinguished from my thinking? Is there any that can be said to be separate from me? For that, for that, for that it is I'm doubting, understanding, wishing is so obvious that nothing further is needed in order to explain it more clearly. But indeed it is also this same, but indeed it is also this same I that, but it's also this same I that is imagining. For although it might be the case, as I have been supposing, that none of these imagined things is true, yet the actual power of imagining certainly does exist and is part of my thinking. And finally, it is the same that it is the same I that perceives by means of the senses, who are or who is aware of corporal things, as if by means of the senses. For example, I'm seeing a light, hearing a noise, feeling heat. But these things are false since I am asleep. But certainly, I seem to be seeing, hearing, getting hot. This cannot be false. This is what is properly meant by thinking of myself as having sensations, and understood in this precise sense, it is nothing other than a thinking. From all of this, I am indeed beginning to know, rather better, that I in fact am. But it still seems, and I cannot help thinking of this, the bodily things of which the images are formed in our thought, and which the senses themselves investigate, are much more distinctly recognized than part of myself, whatever it is, that cannot be represented by the imagination. Although indeed it is strange that things that I realize are doubtful, unknown, and related to me should be more distinctly grasped by me, and what is true and what is known more distinctly grasped by myself. But I see what is happening. My mind enjoys wandering off the track and will not allow itself to be confined within the boundaries of truth. Very well then, let us once again slacken its reins as far as possible. Then, before too long, a tug on them at the right moment will bring it more easily back to obedience. Let us consider those things which are commonly thought to be more distinctly grasped than anything else. I mean the bodies we touch and see, but not bodies in general, for these general perceptions are usually considerably more confused, but one body in particular. Let us, for example, take this wax. It has only just been removed from the honeycomb, has not yet lost all the flavor of its honey. It retains some of the sand of the flowers among which it was gathered. Its color, shape, and size are clearly visible. It is hard, cold, easy to touch. If you tap it with your knuckle, it makes a sound. In short, it has all the properties that seem to be required for a given body to be known as distinctly as possible. But wait, while I am speaking, it is brought close to the fire. The remains of it is, the remains of its flavor evaporate, smell fades, the color is changed, the shape is taken away, it grows in size, becomes liquid, becomes warm, it can hardly be touched, and now, if you strike it, it will give off no sound. Does the same wax still remain? I must admit it does remain. One would say or think it does not. So what was there in it that was so distinctly grasped? Certainly, none of those qualities are apprehended by the senses. For whatever came under taste or smell or sight or touch or hearing has now changed, but the wax remains. Perhaps the truth of the matter was that Perhaps the truth of the matter was what I now think it is, namely that the wax itself was not, in fact, this sweetness of the honey, or the fragrance of the flowers, or the whiteness, shape, or sonority, but the body which not long ago appeared to me as perceptible in these modes, but now appears in others. Oh. Hmm. But what exactly is this that I'm imagining in this way? Let's consider the matter. And thinking away those things that do not belong to the wax, let us see what remains. Something extended, flexible, mutable. Certainly, that is all. But in what do this flexibility and mutability consist? Is it in the fact that I can imagine this wax being changed in shape from a circle to a square, and from a square into a triangle? That cannot be right, for I understand that it is capable of innumerable changes of this sort, yet I cannot keep track of all these changes by using my imagination. Therefore, my understanding of these properties is not achieved by using the faculty of imagination. What about extended? Surely I know something about the nature of its extension, for it is greater when the wax is melting, greater still when it is boiling, and greater still when the heat is further increased. And I will not be correctly judging what the wax is if I fail to see that it is capable of receiving more varieties as regards extension than I have ever grasped in my imagination. Hmm. So I'm left with no alternative but to accept that I am not at all imagining what this wax is, I am perceiving it with my mind alone. I say this wax in particular, for the point is even clear about wax in general. I'm perceiving it with my mind alone. I say this wax in particular, for the point is even clearer about wax in general. So then, what is this wax? It is only perceived by the mind. Certainly, it is the same wax I see, touch, and imagine, and in short, it is the same wax I judge it to be from the beginning. But yet, and this is important, the perception of it is not sight, touch, or imagination, and never was, though it seemed to be so at first. It is an inspection of the mind alone, which can be either imperfect and confused, as it was before in this case, or clear and distinct, as it is now, depending on the greater or lesser degree of attention I pay to what it consists of. But in the meantime, I am amazed by the proneness of my mind to error. For although I am considering all this in myself silently and without speech, yet I am still ensnared by words themselves, and all but deceived by the very ways in which we usually put things. For we say that we see the wax itself if it is present, not that we judge it to be there on the basis of its color or shape. From this, I would have immediately concluded that I therefore knew the wax by the sight of my eyes, not by the inspection of the mind alone. If I had not happened to glance out of the window at people walking along the street, using the customary expression, I say that I see them just as I see the wax. But what do I actually see other than hats and coats, which could be covering automata? But I judge that there are people, and therefore, what I thought I saw with my eyes, I in fact grasp only by the faculty of judging that is in my mind. But one who desires to know more than the common herd might be ashamed to have gone to the speech of the common herd to find a reason for doubting. Let us then go where we left off by considering whether I perceived more perfectly and more evidently what the wax was when I first encountered it, and believed that I knew it by these external senses, or at least by what they call the common sense, that is, the imaginative power. Whatever I perceive is it better now, after I have more carefully investigated both what it is and how it is known. Certainly it would be foolish to doubt that I have a much better grasp of it now. For what, if anything, was distinct in my original perception? What was there, if anything, that seemed to go beyond the perception of the lowest animals? But on the other hand, when I distinguished the wax from its external forms, as I had stripped of its garments, consider it in all its nakedness, then indeed, although there may still be error in my judgments, I cannot perceive it in this way except by the human mind. But what then shall I say about this mind or about myself? For I do not yet accept that there is anything in me but a mind. What am I? Am I who seem to perceive this wax so distinctly? Do I not know myself not only much more truly, much more certainly, but also much more distinctly and evidently than the wax? For if I judge that the wax exists for the reason that I see it, it is certainly much more evident that I myself also exist from the very fact that I am seeing it. For it could be the case that what I am seeing is not really wax. It could be the case that I do not even have eyes with which to see anything, but it certainly cannot be the case when I see something, when I think I am seeing something, The difference is relevant for the moment, that I myself who think should not be something. By the same token, if I judge that the wax exists for the reason that I am touching it, the same consequence follows, namely, that I exist. If I if I judge it exists for the reason I'm imagining it, or for any other reason, again, the same certainly applies. But what I have realized in the case of the wax, I can apply to anything that exists outside myself. Moreover, if the perception of the wax appeared more distinct after it became known to me from many sources, and not from sight or touch alone, how much more distinctly, it must be admitted, I now know myself. There are no reasons that can enhance the perception either of the wax or of any other body at all that do not at the same time prove better to me the nature of my own mind. But there are so many things besides in the mind itself that can serve to make the knowledge, notitia, of it more distinct. There seems scarcely any point in listing all the perceptions that flow into it from the body. But I see now that without realizing it, I have ended up back where I wanted to be. Since I have now learned that bodies themselves are perceived not, strictly speaking, by the senses or by the imaginative faculty, but by the intellect alone, and that they are not perceived because they are touched or seen, but only because they are understood, I clearly recognize, cognosco, that nothing can be perceived by me more easily or more clearly than my own mind. Nothing can be perceived by me more easily or more clearly than my own mind. But since a long held opinion is a habit that cannot so readily be laid aside, I intend to stop here for a while in order to fix this newly acquired knowledge more deeply into my memory by long meditation. Oh dear.